James Carter had everything most people dreamed of. Money, luxury cars, a sprawling mansion. But none of it made him happy. Beneath the surface, he was lonely and distrustful, convinced that everyone around him cared only about his wealth. Friends came and went, family members argued over inheritance, and business partners flattered him only when they wanted something. One rainy evening, James's sleek sports car skidded off the road during a storm, leaving him injured and unconscious. When he woke up briefly in the hospital, doctors assured him he'd recover fully. But as nurses bustled around him, James overheard snippets of conversation. Some careless, some greedy. It confirmed what he already suspected. No one truly cared about him. An idea formed in his mind. What if he pretended to stay in a coma? He could lie there silently, listening to what people said when they thought he couldn't hear them. Maybe then he'd know who really loved him, or if anyone did at all. With a heavy sigh, James closed his eyes again, slipping into his role as the unconscious patient. Little did he know, this decision would lead to unexpected revelations, and an encounter that would change his life forever. Days turned into weeks as James lay motionless in his hospital bed, listening to the world around him. At first, it was quiet, just the rhythmic beeping of machines and the soft shuffle of nurses' feet. But soon, visitors began arriving, each one bringing a new layer of truth about how people saw him. His business partner, Greg, stopped by one afternoon, accompanied by murmurs of concern, or so it seemed at first. "Poor James," Greg said, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Such a shame he's out like this. Still, I hope he pulls through quickly. We need him for the merger next month." James clenched his fists under the blanket, anger simmering inside him. So this was what Greg cared about, the deal, not his well-being. Family members weren't much better. His sister, Diana, arrived with her husband, whispering loudly enough for him to hear. "If he doesn't wake up soon, who gets the money?" she asked nervously. "I mean, we deserve something after all these years, don't we?" Her words stung, confirming what James had always suspected. They only cared about his fortune, not him. Even the doctors didn't escape his scrutiny. One physician casually joked with a colleague about how long James might stay in the coma, and how lucrative the extended treatment would be for the hospital. Each conversation chipped away at James's faith in humanity. He felt more alone than ever, trapped in a body that couldn't respond while the voices around him revealed their true colors. But then there was Emily. Emily wasn't like the others. She came every shift, speaking softly as she checked his vitals or adjusted his "4. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," she'd say cheerfully, even though she believed he couldn't hear her. "We're going to take good care of you today." Her touch was gentle, her presence calming. Unlike everyone else, she treated him with respect, not as a wealthy man, but as a person. One day, she brought a small potted plant and placed it on the windowsill near his bed. "Plants make any room feel brighter," she explained brightly. "Even if you can't see it right now, I think it'll help." James wanted to smile, to thank her for the gesture, but he stayed still, letting her believe he was unaware. As days passed, Emily became a constant source of comfort in his otherwise bleak existence. While others gossiped or schemed, she worked tirelessly, ensuring he was comfortable and cared for. Her kindness stood out against the selfishness of everyone else, making James curious about her. Who was she? Why did she care so much? Little did he know, Emily carried burdens of her own. Burdens she would soon share with him, unknowingly changing his life forever. One quiet evening, after most of the hospital staff had left for the night, Emily stayed late to finish her rounds. She moved softly through the dimly lit halls, her sneakers squeaking faintly against the tiled floor. When she reached James's room, she paused, glancing at the clock. It was almost midnight, long past visiting hours, but something about this patient kept drawing her back. James listened intently as Emily entered, her steps light but deliberate. He could hear her humming softly under her breath, a gentle melody that seemed to fill the silence. "All right, Mr. Carter," she murmured, pulling up a chair beside his bed. Let's check your vitals one more time before I call it a night. Her hands worked efficiently, adjusting the 4-drip and ensuring the monitors were functioning properly. But instead of leaving right away, she lingered, resting her elbows on the edge of his bed. For a moment, she simply sat there, staring out the window at the darkened city skyline. "I know you can't hear me," she said finally, her voice soft and tinged with exhaustion. "But sometimes it helps to talk, even if no one answers." James's heart skipped a beat. Was she going to open up? He had heard bits and pieces of conversations from other nurses before, but nothing like what came next. "My little brother is sick," Emily began, her tone heavy with emotion. "He has a rare condition and the treatments are expensive. Really expensive. I've been working 2 jobs just to keep up with the bills, but it never feels like enough." She sighed deeply, rubbing her temples as if trying to ease the weight pressing down on her shoulders. "Sometimes I feel so tired, like I'm running on empty. And then I come here to work and I see patients like you. People who seem so strong on the outside but might be fighting battles we can't even imagine." Her voice cracked slightly, and she stopped to compose herself. James wanted to reach out to tell her he understood, that he saw her strength, but he remained still, letting her continue. "But even when things get hard," she went on, "I remind myself why I do this, why I became a nurse in the first place. It's not for the money or the recognition. It's because I want to help people, to make their lives a little easier, even if it's just for a moment." She glanced at James, her expression thoughtful. "Everyone says you're cold and distant, that you don't care about anyone but yourself. But I don't believe that. I think deep down you're someone who cares too much, and maybe that's why you push people away. Am I wrong?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. Emily smiled faintly, shaking her head as if amused by her own musings. "Anyway, I should go. These late-night talks are probably keeping you awake, or would, if you were awake." She stood up, smoothing her scrubs before heading toward the door. Before leaving, she turned back for a moment, her gaze lingering on him. "Get better soon, okay? Whoever you are underneath all that money and success, I think you're worth knowing." With that, she slipped out of the room, leaving James alone with his thoughts. For hours, James replayed her words in his mind. Her confession struck a chord deep within him, not just because of her struggles, but because of how she saw him. In a world where everyone judged him based on his wealth, Emily looked beyond the surface. She believed in goodness even when others didn't. Her honesty moved him in ways he hadn't expected. Here was a woman sacrificing everything for her family, working tirelessly without complaint, yet finding moments to show kindness to strangers like him. How could someone carry so much pain and still radiate compassion? As dawn broke outside his window, James realized something important. Emily wasn't just helping him heal physically. She was teaching him what it meant to truly live. And for the first time in years, he felt a spark of hope. The days that followed Emily's confession were different for James. He couldn't stop thinking about her words, about her brother's illness, her exhaustion, and the quiet strength she carried despite it all. Her belief in his goodness, even when others doubted him, stirred something deep inside him. For years, James had convinced himself that he didn't need anyone, that wealth was enough to shield him from loneliness. But lying there, listening to Emily pour out her heart, he realized how wrong he had been. Money couldn't buy trust, connection, or love. And while he had spent his life building an empire, he hadn't built anything meaningful. No real friendships, no family bonds, no sense of purpose beyond profit. Her struggles put his own life into perspective. Here was a woman working multiple jobs, barely sleeping, and yet still showing kindness to someone like him. A man she believed was trapped in a coma. What did that say about her character? About his? James knew he couldn't stay silent forever. Pretending to be unconscious had given him clarity. But now it was time to act. If Emily could face her challenges with such courage, then surely he could find a way to help her, and maybe, in doing so, begin to heal himself. One afternoon, after Emily left his room, James discreetly asked a nurse for access to the hospital's patient records. Under the guise of checking his own medical file, he managed to locate information about Emily's brother. The details confirmed what she had shared: a rare condition requiring expensive treatments, mounting bills, and countless appointments. That evening, James called his personal assistant, instructing her to handle the situation quietly. "Pay off Emily's debts," he said firmly, "and cover her brother's medical expenses moving forward. Make sure she doesn't know where the money is coming from." His assistant hesitated, surprised by the request. "Sir, are you sure? This isn't exactly business-related." "It doesn't need to be," James replied. "Just do it." Over the next few days, arrangements were made. Bills were settled, accounts cleared, and future payments secured, all without Emily's knowledge. James felt a strange mix of satisfaction and unease. For the first time in years, he was using his wealth not to impress or intimidate, but to make someone else's life easier. Yet, as much as he wanted to reveal himself, to tell Emily that he'd heard every word and appreciated her kindness, he resisted. Something held him back. Maybe it was fear of rejection, or maybe it was the realization that true generosity required anonymity. Whatever the reason, he decided to wait until the right moment. Meanwhile, Emily noticed changes in her life almost immediately. Bills she had been dreading suddenly disappeared. Calls from debt collectors stopped. Even her brother's doctors seemed more optimistic, mentioning mysterious donations covering upcoming treatments. At first, she assumed it was a clerical error or some kind of hospital grant program. But as the pattern continued, doubt crept in. Who could have done this? And why? She considered asking questions, but part of her didn't want to know. Whoever it was, they clearly intended to remain anonymous. Instead, she focused on the relief flooding her life, the ability to breathe again, to sleep without nightmares about finances, to spend more time caring for her patients instead of worrying about survival. Back in his room, James watched Emily closely during her shifts. She seemed lighter somehow, less burdened, more at ease. It pleased him to see her smile more often, even as guilt tugged at him. He wished he could take credit for what he'd done, but he also understood that revealing himself might ruin everything. Instead, he chose to observe, finding joy in small moments. When she joked about the plant thriving on his windowsill, he imagined laughing along with her. When she hummed softly while adjusting his monitors, he listened intently, memorizing the melody. Each interaction reminded him of how far he had come since the accident. Not physically, but emotionally. Before, he had seen people as transactions, relationships as investments. Now he saw them as human beings, flawed and beautiful, deserving of compassion and care. Emily unknowingly had taught him that lesson. One night, as she checked his vitals, Emily paused, studying his face thoughtfully. "You know," she said softly, "I think you're going to wake up soon. I can feel it. You're too stubborn to stay asleep forever." James wanted to laugh, to sit up and tell her she was right. But he stayed still, letting her believe she was guessing correctly. "I'll be here when you do," she added with a small smile. "So don't keep me waiting too long. Okay?" Her words lingered in the air as she left the room, leaving James overwhelmed with emotion. He realized then that helping Emily wasn't just about easing her burdens. It was about rediscovering his own humanity. By giving her hope, he had found his own. And though he still planned to keep his secret for now, he knew one thing for certain. Whatever happened next, their lives would never be the same. When James finally decided to wake up, it was with a mix of excitement and nervousness. For weeks, he had listened to Emily's kindness, reflected on his own life, and secretly helped her without her knowing. Now, it was time to step back into the world, but not as the same man who had entered the hospital. The doctors were surprised but pleased when James opened his eyes one morning, blinking against the bright light streaming through the window. Nurses rushed in, checking his vitals and asking questions to assess his mental state. Through it all, James remained calm, smiling faintly as he took in the flurry of activity around him. "Welcome back, Mr. Carter," one of the doctors said warmly. "We weren't sure how long you'd be out." "I'm glad to be back," James replied softly, his voice hoarse from disuse. But his gaze kept drifting toward the door, waiting for the person he most wanted to see, Emily. Later that afternoon, Emily walked into his room, carrying a clipboard and wearing her usual cheerful smile. When she saw him awake, her eyes widened in shock. "Mr. Carter," she exclaimed, rushing to his side. "You're awake. How are you feeling?" "I'm doing okay," James replied, meeting her gaze steadily. "Thanks to you." Emily blushed slightly, brushing off his gratitude. "I didn't do anything special. Just my job." "You did more than you realize," he said sincerely. "I heard everything while I was asleep. Your care made a big difference." Her cheeks flushed deeper, unsure how to respond. She wasn't used to praise, especially not from someone like James Carter, a man known for being cold and distant. "Well, I'm just glad you're okay," she said finally, turning her attention to the clipboard. "Let me check your vitals real quick." As she worked, James studied her closely. There was no trace of the exhaustion that had weighed her down before. Instead, she seemed lighter, brighter, proof that his actions had truly helped. Over the next few days, their bond deepened as they interacted more frequently. Emily continued caring for him during her shifts, but their conversations grew longer, filled with laughter and shared stories. James learned about her childhood dreams of becoming a nurse, her love for gardening, and her determination to help others despite her struggles. In return, James opened up about his own life, not the public persona of wealth and success, but the private battles with loneliness and mistrust. "I've spent so much time chasing money," he admitted one evening as they sat together after her shift ended. "But none of it ever made me happy." "Not really," Emily nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes we chase things thinking they'll fix everything, only to realize they don't fill the emptiness inside us." "Exactly," James agreed, impressed by her insight. "And then someone comes along and shows you what truly matters." He didn't say her name, but the look in his eyes said it all. Emily smiled shyly, unsure how to respond. Despite her gratitude for the mysterious donations that had changed her life, Emily still hadn't connected the dots to James. He never mentioned them, choosing instead to focus on building a genuine connection with her. They talked about books, movies, and even future plans, small moments that revealed how much they had in common. As James recovered physically, he began making changes in his life too. He stepped away from his high-stress corporate role, delegating responsibilities to trusted colleagues. Instead, he devoted more time to philanthropy, funding programs for underprivileged families and supporting hospitals like the one where he had stayed. Through it all, Emily remained a constant presence in his life. Even after he was discharged, she visited him regularly, bringing updates on her brother's progress and sharing stories from work. One day, as they strolled through a park near his home, James turned to her with a thoughtful expression. "Emily," he began hesitantly, "there's something I need to tell you." She stopped walking, concern flickering across her face. "What is it?" "I know about the donations, the ones that paid off your debts and covered your brother's treatments." Her eyes widened in disbelief. "What? How could you possibly?" "It was me," he confessed gently. "I overheard you talking that night, and I wanted to help. I didn't want you to know because, well, I didn't want it to change how you saw me." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she processed his words. "Why would you do that? You barely knew me." "Because you reminded me of something I had forgotten," he replied softly. "That true wealth isn't measured in money. It's measured in the lives we touch and the connections we build. You saved me, Emily, maybe not physically, but emotionally. And I wanted to repay that kindness in any way I could." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Emily hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "More than I can ever say." Their relationship evolved naturally after that, built on mutual respect, trust, and shared experiences. James introduced Emily to his world, showing her the impact she had inspired him to create. In return, Emily grounded him, reminding him of the importance of humility and compassion. Together, they proved that true fulfillment came not from riches or status, but from helping others and forming meaningful relationships. James's transformation wasn't just about helping Emily. It was about rediscovering himself. The man who had once valued wealth above all else now found joy in giving back, using his resources to make a real difference in people's lives. Inspired by Emily's selflessness, he decided to step away from the flashy lifestyle that had defined him for so long. He sold his luxury cars, downsized his mansion, and moved into a modest home closer to the hospital where Emily worked. It wasn't about rejecting his wealth entirely. It was about choosing simplicity and focusing on what truly mattered. For the first time in years, James felt at peace. Emily watched his journey with admiration, seeing how much he had changed since they first met. The arrogant millionaire she had heard about was gone, replaced by a humble man who cared deeply about others. Their bond grew stronger as they continued working together, him funding projects she believed in, her guiding him toward causes that needed attention. One evening, as they sat together on James's porch watching the sunset, Emily turned to him with a thoughtful smile. "You've come so far," she said softly. "I'm proud of you." James chuckled, shaking his head. "Coming from you, that means everything. You're the reason I started down this path in the first place." "I didn't do anything special," she protested. "You did the hard work." "No," he replied firmly. "You showed me what it meant to live with purpose, to care for others without expecting anything in return. That's something I'll never forget." Her cheeks flushed slightly, but she smiled warmly. "Well, I guess we saved each other in a way." James nodded, taking her hand gently. "That's exactly right, and I hope we keep doing it, for as long as we can." As months passed, their partnership blossomed into something deeper. They weren't just friends or collaborators, they were soulmates in every sense of the word. Together, they launched initiatives to support struggling families, fund medical treatments, and provide scholarships for students pursuing careers in healthcare. James often joked that he owed his second chance at life to Emily, but deep down he knew it was true. She had shown him that kindness could heal wounds money never could. And in return, he gave her the stability and support she needed to chase her dreams without fear. Even Emily's brother benefited from their combined efforts. With proper treatment and care, his condition improved dramatically, allowing him to dream of a future he once thought impossible. Years later, when asked about their story, James would simply say, "It all started with a confession that revealed Emily's struggles and ultimately James's humanity. Through her honesty, he learned to see the world differently, to value compassion over wealth, connection over isolation. For Emily, James became more than just a patient or benefactor. He was a partner, a friend, and eventually the love of her life. Together, they built a legacy rooted in kindness, proving that even the smallest acts of generosity could ripple outward, touching countless lives. In the end, both James and Emily realized the same truth, that true happiness came not from what you gained, but from what you gave. By helping others, they had found themselves and each other, and as they stood side by side, looking toward the future, they knew their journey was far from over. There were still challenges to face, lives to change, and dreams to chase. But whatever came next, they would face it together, as equals, as partners, and as family. Because sometimes the greatest transformations begin with a single act of belief in someone else and in oneself. If James and Emily's story touched your heart, share it with others. Let us know in the comments. How has kindness or gratitude impacted your life? Your stories inspire us to keep creating tales that matter.